The auditorium was buzzing with voices. People were finding their seats, chatting with friends, laughing, and occasionally looking toward the stage where the show would begin soon. Children were excitedly moving around, some holding tickets tightly in their hands, while others sat on the edges of chairs, trying to catch a glimpse of what was coming. The room was full of energy, a mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and the nervous excitement that comes before a live performance. No one could have predicted that one small moment would change the atmosphere completely. In a quiet corner of the room, a small girl sat with her back straight, trying to keep still on the hard chair. She held a sheet of music close to her chest, glancing at it now and then, but mostly staring at the stage. She was not part of the program. She had come just to watch. Her fingers fiddled nervously with the edges of the paper, twisting it slightly, and then smoothing it down again. Her eyes, big and bright, watched the stage where performers were preparing. There was a mix of fear and hope in her gaze, as if she wanted to do something but wasn't sure she could. Across the room, organizers were moving back and forth, making sure everything was ready. Lights were adjusted, microphones tested, and chairs rearranged. They had been expecting the usual performers, rehearsed and ready. But then someone noticed the small girl sitting quietly in the corner. She wasn't calling attention to herself. She wasn't trying to stand out, but she held something in her hands that caught their attention. It wasn't a toy or a book. It was a sheet of piano music, and it was clear from the way she held it that she knew it well. The organizers whispered to each other. "She can play, can't she?" One asked quietly, not wanting to disturb the crowd. The other nodded, eyes following the girl's fingers lightly tapping the edge of the paper, almost in time with an imaginary rhythm. There was a sense of possibility in the air, a quiet magic that made them pause. Should they call her up? Would the audience even be ready for an impromptu performance? It was risky, but something about the way she sat, so small and nervous yet focused, told them that this might be a moment worth taking. They signaled to a few other helpers and quietly moved toward the girl. She looked up at them, eyes wide, unsure what was happening. One of the organizers knelt down and smiled gently. "Would you like to play for everyone?" they asked softly, trying not to startle her. The girl's hands froze over the music. She shook her head slightly at first, unsure. The crowd was so big. The stage looked so high and bright. But there was something kind in the way the organizer spoke, something that made her feel safe, as if she could do it and no one would laugh or judge. She hesitated for a long moment, biting her lip, staring at the shiny floor, then up at the stage lights. Her small chest rose and fell quickly. Finally, she nodded almost imperceptibly. The organizer gave a small, encouraging smile and held out a hand. She took it carefully, as if touching something fragile, and let herself be guided to the stage. Every step was small, measured, each one bringing her closer to something unknown. The audience noticed her now, some whispering, some leaning forward, curious who the tiny figure climbing the steps might be. As she reached the piano, she paused, looking down at the keys, which seemed much larger than she imagined. Her hands hovered over them, trembling slightly. The lights on her face made her features soft and delicate, highlighting the nervous concentration in her eyes. The audience began to quiet down, sensing that something special was about to happen. The organizers stepped back, giving her space, and whispered a final word of encouragement. She took a deep breath, placing her hands gently on the keys, feeling their smooth surface, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her small shoulders. The first note she played was quiet, almost hesitant, but it was clear and true. It echoed slightly in the auditorium, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The people who had been talking moments ago froze, turning toward the source of the sound. The girl's small fingers began to move with more confidence, pressing down the keys in a simple, soft melody. The music was delicate, sweet, and unexpectedly strong. It was as if the piano was speaking through her, telling a story without words. With each note, her confidence grew. Her fingers moved more fluidly, though still with the careful precision of someone new to being in the spotlight. The audience watched, captivated by the sight of someone so small producing such beautiful sound. Children sat still in their chairs, parents leaned forward, and even the busy organizers paused to listen. There was a hush that settled over the room, a quiet that was different from the usual pre-show murmur. It was a hush full of anticipation, curiosity, and something deeper, wonder. She did not look at the audience, not really. Her eyes were on the keys, on the music, but there was a connection forming. The music she played carried emotion, and the listeners could feel it. It was not just notes and rhythm. It was something heartfelt, something sincere. People felt her nervousness, her courage, and her love for the piano. It was impossible not to be drawn into the story she was telling through her music. Time seemed to slow. Each note hung in the air, delicate but powerful. The audience, once so noisy, now held their breath. It was as if the girl's small hands had cast a spell, and the room was under its effect. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others sat forward, unable to look away, their hearts caught up in the gentle flow of sound. The energy in the room shifted from casual chatter to attentive awe, all because of this small girl and her piano. When she finished the first piece, she paused, hands resting lightly on the keys. The silence was heavy, almost tangible. People were not sure how to react at first, overwhelmed by what they had just heard. The organizers exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that something remarkable was happening. Then, gradually, small claps began, growing steadily into applause. The girl's face flushed slightly, a shy smile forming as she realized the audience appreciated her. It was a small, quiet moment of triumph, a recognition that she had shared something important. That first part of the story, her arrival on stage, her initial hesitation, and the first notes she played, set the tone for what was to come. Everyone in the room felt it, a sense of expectation and excitement building. The small girl had done something unexpected. She had brought silence, focus, and emotion to a room that had been full of noise. She had shown courage in stepping forward, and her music had captured hearts even before the performance had fully begun. As the applause continued, she took another deep breath, fingers hovering over the keys, ready to continue. The organizers smiled from the side, proud and amazed. The audience leaned in, curious and eager. In that moment, it was clear that this small girl, pulled from the crowd, was about to give a performance no one would ever forget. The small girl sat at the piano, her hands hovering above the keys, as if waiting for some invisible signal. Her heart was pounding so loudly she feared the audience might hear it. The applause had faded slightly, leaving a quiet tension in the room. Every eye was on her now. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement swirling inside her. She had never played in front of so many people before. Her stomach felt tight, but there was a spark of determination in her chest. She wanted to do this. She wanted to show them what she could do. Her fingers finally touched the keys again, gentle at first, pressing down slowly. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, trying to imagine herself somewhere safe, somewhere quiet where she could play without anyone watching. Then she opened her eyes and looked at the piano, letting the familiar shapes and sounds guide her. Her hands moved with more confidence now, producing notes that were clear and soft. The melody began to take shape, simple at first, but filled with feeling. She could feel the music coming from deep inside her, a voice she had carried in her heart for years. The audience was silent again, captivated. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, as they watched the small girl's fingers dance across the keys. They could see her trembling slightly, but also the focus and care she put into each note. It was mesmerizing. Even the adults who had been polite and quiet until now found themselves holding their breath, not wanting to miss a single moment. Children in the audience watched her with awe, seeing someone their own age creating something beautiful and powerful. She remembered the long hours she had spent practicing at home, the mornings and afternoons when she had played until her fingers ached. She thought of the small room she practiced in, where only the walls listened to her mistakes and her triumphs. The piano had always been her friend, a place where she could express herself without words. Now, on the stage, it felt the same, only bigger and somehow more alive. The keys responded to her touch as if they understood the story she wanted to tell. As she continued, her nervousness began to fade. Each note gave her courage. The melody became richer, smoother, flowing from her hands naturally. She started to forget the crowd entirely, lost in the music. Her small body moved slightly with the rhythm, her head nodding gently, feeling each chord and pause. There was a rhythm to her heartbeat, matching the rhythm of the piano, a secret connection that made her feel strong and centered. The audience could sense it too, feeling the emotion behind every note. The song she was playing was not complicated, but it carried a depth that went beyond technique. It was filled with emotion, the kind that touches hearts without needing words. She played with care, with honesty, and with a sincerity that was rare. Each time she struck a key, she seemed to pour a part of herself into the music. The audience could feel it, a silent conversation between the girl and everyone in the room. They were listening not just to the piano, but to her courage, her hope, and her vulnerability. She stumbled slightly on one note, a tiny mistake that might have made her stop if she were at home alone. But here she did not pause. She took a deep breath and continued, letting the mistake fade into the music. In that moment, she felt a surge of confidence. She realized that the audience was not judging her. They were supporting her, encouraging her without even making a sound. That silent encouragement was stronger than any applause she had ever heard. It lifted her, helped her focus, and reminded her why she loved to play. Her eyes glanced briefly at the audience. Faces were soft, calm, and attentive. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the purity of the music. Some children looked amazed, whispering to each other about the small girl playing with such talent. Adults smiled, some shaking their heads in disbelief, as if they couldn't believe someone so young could bring such beauty into the room. The connection was real, and it filled her with a quiet joy. She felt seen, understood, and appreciated. The melody continued, growing slightly bolder, the notes flowing faster but still carefully, like a river moving steadily. She experimented with small variations, letting her creativity shine through. She didn't know if she was impressing anyone. She only knew that the music felt right, that it was true to her. Every sound was a piece of her story, a reflection of her experiences and emotions. The audience felt it, responding with attentive silence, caught up in the spell she was weaving with her small hands and her big heart. Time passed differently on the stage. Minutes felt like seconds. She was fully immersed, unaware of anything else. The world outside the auditorium seemed to vanish. There was only the piano, the music, and the audience holding their breath in wonder. Each note carried her further into the song. Each pause made the next chord even more meaningful. She had never felt such freedom and power in playing before. It was a new experience, thrilling and terrifying at the same time, but she embraced it completely. When she reached a particularly emotional part of the piece, she closed her eyes again, letting herself feel the music more than think about it. Her fingers pressed the keys with intention, some notes soft, some louder, each carefully chosen to express the feeling she wanted to share. She imagined the story behind the music, a story of hope, of courage, of finding one's voice despite fear. The audience was silent, listening intently, as if they too were imagining the story she was telling. By now, she was no longer nervous at all. The fear that had gripped her in the beginning had transformed into exhilaration. She realized she could do this. She realized that the music she loved so much could also touch others, could move them, and that it was okay to be nervous and still brave at the same time. Each note was a triumph, a small victory over the fear that had almost stopped her from playing. She smiled slightly, not at the audience, but to herself, feeling proud of the courage she had found. As the piece came to a gentle ending, she slowed her fingers, letting the last notes linger in the air. The room stayed quiet for a moment, as if everyone was savoring the final sound. Then, gradually, soft claps began, growing steadily into stronger applause. She looked up this time, her eyes wide with surprise. The audience was clapping, cheering softly, some even standing. She felt a rush of happiness, a mix of relief and joy. She had faced her fear, shared her music, and the world had listened. It was an unforgettable moment, one that she knew would stay in her heart forever. The organizers stepped closer, giving her gentle smiles and quiet words of praise. They whispered that she had done wonderfully, that she had inspired everyone in the room. She nodded shyly, feeling both proud and a little overwhelmed. Her small body shook slightly with excitement, but she felt a warmth inside that made every step onto the stage worth it. The room, once loud and bustling, had transformed into a space filled with respect, awe, and quiet wonder. All because a small girl had found the courage to play her music. The small girl continued to play, her fingers now moving with a confidence that amazed even her. The melody grew richer, stronger, and more expressive, each note telling a part of a story that words could never capture. She had begun to lose herself in the music, forgetting about the audience, the stage, and even the lights. There was only the piano and the feelings flowing through her hands. Each key she pressed carried emotion, vulnerability, and a sense of bravery that no one could have expected from someone so young. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, unable to believe the depth of music coming from the small girl in front of them. They whispered softly to each other at first, then quieted down, realizing that interrupting would take away from the magic unfolding. People felt the story in the music. They could sense the mixture of fear, courage, joy, and hope that had built up in her mind and was now being expressed through her playing. Even those who did not know much about piano felt the beauty, feeling the rhythm in their hearts. The melody shifted, becoming more intricate. Her fingers danced quickly across the keys, yet they never stumbled. Each chord was deliberate, each pause meaningful. She had practiced many times at home, but performing in front of a live audience was a completely different experience. And yet, she had found a rhythm within herself, a balance between concentration and feeling, between technique and emotion. Her music became a bridge connecting her to everyone in the room, each person feeling the emotion she poured into her performance. As she played, she imagined the people around her not as strangers, but as listeners sitting in her own living room, friends who cared about her music. This thought gave her courage. She imagined their smiles, their gentle nods, their quiet encouragement. She played not for approval, but to share something beautiful with them. The audience could sense this honesty. There was no showmanship or pretense, just a small girl expressing herself fully through her music. It was raw, real, and powerful. A few children in the audience whispered to their parents about how amazing it was that someone their own age could play so well. Adults smiled, some quietly shaking their heads in disbelief. The energy in the room was unique, an almost tangible presence that made everyone feel closer, connected through the music. It was a rare kind of silence, one that spoke louder than any conversation could. The girl played on, her nerves completely gone, replaced by a calm focus and a quiet joy that was evident in every note. She reached the middle section of her piece, where the melody became more complex, with faster sequences of notes and small, subtle variations. Her fingers moved expertly, almost effortlessly, over the keys. She had practiced these sections many times, yet she felt a thrill playing them in front of a live audience. Each chord was like a heartbeat, each note a word in an unspoken story. The audience was spellbound, watching her small hands create something much bigger than herself. During a particularly delicate part of the melody, her eyes closed again. She let herself feel every note, every pause, every subtle shift in the sound. The music carried her into a world she knew well, a place where only her piano and her imagination existed. She thought of the quiet mornings and afternoons at home, where she practiced for hours without interruption. She remembered the patience she had learned, the mistakes she had corrected, and the joy she had felt when a passage came out perfectly. All of those experiences came together now, giving her strength and purpose. The audience seemed to hold its breath in this part of the performance. Every sound, soft and precise, reached their ears like a gentle wave. The music spoke in a language they could understand without needing words. Some closed their eyes to feel it more deeply. Some leaned closer, trying to absorb every note. The connection between the girl and the audience was growing stronger. They were not merely listening. They were experiencing her music, feeling her story as if it were their own. The girl smiled slightly as she played, not looking at anyone, just letting the music flow. She felt a deep satisfaction, a joy she had never known before. Each note was a victory over fear, a moment of expression that made her feel alive. She realized she could share herself with others in a way that words could never do. Her tiny hands had the power to move hearts, and that thought made her feel proud and humble at the same time. As the performance continued, she began to add small embellishments, little flourishes that made the piece more personal. She had learned them during her practice, but here they took on new meaning. The audience noticed these touches, subtle yet impactful. They were not expecting a small girl to take the music in her own direction, to play with such emotion and individuality. The effect was magical. People felt the depth and creativity of her mind expressed through every chord, every gentle pause, every rising and falling note. Her hands never faltered, even when the piece demanded quick movements and precise timing. She had learned discipline at home, the quiet repetition that builds skill. Now it showed. She played with grace and fluidity, each note blending seamlessly into the next. There was no hesitation, no doubt. Only the music, flowing naturally from her heart through her fingers into the room. It was impossible not to be drawn in by the beauty and sincerity of her playing. Time seemed suspended. The audience could not look away. They were enraptured, caught up in a small girl's piano playing that seemed beyond her years. Some felt tears prick their eyes as the music touched something deep within them. Others felt a smile rise involuntarily, drawn by the purity and simplicity of her performance. The girl, lost in her own world of sound, could sense the emotional energy of the room, though she did not let it distract her. She allowed it to flow into the music, enhancing every note with the shared feeling of connection. The melody shifted once more, softer now, more reflective. She allowed herself a pause between phrases, savoring the sound and letting the audience absorb it. The soft rhythm of her playing was like a gentle wave, drawing the listeners further into her story. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. She had learned to play not just for the technical perfection of the music, but for the emotion it could carry. Here, in front of so many people, that lesson mattered more than ever. With the final section approaching, she gathered all her courage and energy. Her small hands moved over the keys with precision and care, building toward a conclusion that was both powerful and tender. Every note resonated in the hearts of the audience. Every chord struck a chord in their emotions. The room was silent, save for the music and the occasional quiet gasp of admiration. The girl was completely absorbed, yet aware of the importance of every sound she produced. As the last notes echoed softly into the room, she allowed them to linger, feeling their vibration fade. She sat still for a moment, hands resting lightly on the keys, breathing deeply. The audience remained quiet, savoring the end of the piece. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, the room erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, yet joyful, a recognition of the courage, skill, and heart that had gone into the performance. The girl smiled shyly, a blush spreading across her cheeks, as the organizers and audience alike praised her silently through clapping and smiles. She looked at the piano, the instrument that had been her companion through practice and now through triumph. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, a quiet pride in herself that could not be measured by applause alone. She had faced her fear, shared her talent, and touched the hearts of everyone in the room. The memory of this moment, of the connection she had made through her music, would stay with her forever, a powerful reminder of what courage, dedication, and honesty could achieve. The small girl had now fully immersed herself in the music. Her fingers moved with an elegance that seemed almost effortless, producing sounds that filled every corner of the auditorium. The audience was no longer just watching. They were experiencing the music alongside her. The melody carried a story, not of words, but of emotion, courage, and beauty. Each note seemed to hang in the air, waiting to be absorbed, understood, and felt by everyone present. There was a magic in the silence that followed each phrase, a hush so profound that it almost became its own part of the performance. Children sat wide-eyed, gripping the edges of their chairs, unsure whether to clap or simply continue listening. Parents leaned forward, some holding their breath, caught in the delicate thread of sound that connected them to the small girl at the piano. Every individual in the room felt a shared experience, a quiet unity brought together by the simple yet powerful act of a young girl expressing herself through music. The room had transformed from a busy, noisy space to one of focused attention, empathy, and silent admiration. The girl's hands danced across the keys with a rhythm that was mesmerizing. Even small mistakes, which might have caused panic at home, were now seamlessly incorporated into the music. They became part of the story she was telling, adding depth and authenticity. Her focus was absolute. Her small body swayed slightly with the motion, her head nodding in time with the music, completely absorbed. She had become the center of a universe where the piano was her voice, and the audience, her listener. She glanced occasionally at the sheet music, not to follow it strictly, but to ensure that she was capturing the essence of what she wanted to express. Sometimes she glanced at the audience, briefly noticing the soft smiles, the tearful eyes, and the expressions of awe and wonder. Those fleeting moments of connection strengthened her resolve. She knew that she was not performing merely for herself, but sharing a gift that could touch the hearts of others. The thought was both humbling and empowering. As the piece progressed, the complexity of the melody increased. Her fingers moved faster, yet each note was distinct and purposeful. She had practiced these sections countless times, but performing them live brought an energy that practice alone could never provide. The audience was entranced, hanging onto every movement of her hands, every rise and fall of the melody. Even the air in the room seemed to vibrate with the intensity of her playing. People were not just listening, they were feeling every emotion that she channeled into the piano. Her breathing was steady, controlled, yet subtle signs of nervous excitement were visible. Her small shoulders lifted and fell slightly with each phrase, her cheeks flushed with a delicate pink. Despite the pressure of being on stage, she had found a calm rhythm within herself, a balance between focus and the natural flow of music. The audience could sense this harmony, feeling the connection between the girl and her instrument as if it were a conversation without words. In one particularly emotional section, she allowed the music to become soft and vulnerable. Her fingers pressed gently on the keys, creating a sound that was delicate, almost like a whisper. The audience leaned in instinctively, wanting to catch every nuance. The room seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the sincerity of her performance. Each note was a reflection of her heart, a small piece of her story being shared openly. People were moved, some visibly, by the purity and honesty in her playing. She smiled faintly to herself, a private acknowledgement of her own courage. The fear that had gripped her at the start had been replaced by a quiet confidence. She realized that she could face challenges, that she could step into the unknown and still find her strength. The music was not just notes and rhythms. It was a statement of bravery, of a small girl proving that she could rise above her doubts and touch the hearts of others. The audience could feel this, and it made the moment even more profound. The melody began to rise, building in intensity and complexity. Her hands moved quickly yet precisely, every note deliberate. She was telling a story now, one that seemed to reach beyond the walls of the auditorium. The audience was spellbound. Eyes were fixed on her small hands, following every movement, every chord, every subtle pause. There was no distraction, no chatter, just an attentive audience drawn into the world of her music. It was a rare kind of silence, one that spoke louder than any words could, filled with appreciation, respect, and awe. Her imagination carried her through the music. She pictured herself in different places, each note evoking memories of quiet afternoons at home, of the joy and frustration of learning new passages, and of the countless hours spent practicing in solitude. Those experiences gave depth to her performance, a richness that went beyond technique. The audience could sense the authenticity, the reality behind every sound. They were witnessing more than a performance. They were witnessing the embodiment of dedication, passion, and heart. As she approached the final section of the piece, the music softened again, becoming more reflective. Her fingers moved slowly and deliberately, savoring each note. She felt a deep sense of completion, a satisfaction that came from expressing something meaningful. The audience leaned in, sensing the conclusion, feeling the final notes resonate through the room. The connection between performer and listener had reached its peak. It was a shared experience of emotion, courage, and beauty that transcended age, background, and expectation. The last chord lingered in the air, a gentle echo that seemed to stretch time for a moment. The girl kept her hands on the keys, letting the sound fade naturally. The room was completely silent, as if no one wanted to disturb the magic of the moment. Every person present felt the impact of her performance, carrying with it a sense of awe and respect. Then, gradually, soft claps began, growing louder and stronger as the audience recognized the small girl's achievement. Some stood, unable to contain their admiration, while others smiled through tears, moved by what they had just experienced. She allowed herself a small, shy smile, feeling a warmth that spread through her chest. The organizers and audience members moved closer, offering praise and encouragement. She felt proud yet humbled. She had stepped into the unknown, shared her heart, and found that people not only accepted her courage but celebrated it. The experience was transformative, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The small girl had shown that bravery, talent, and sincerity could create moments of connection that lingered long after the final note had faded. As the applause continued, she sat quietly, hands resting lightly on the keys, breathing deeply. The room, once filled with chatter and movement, had been transformed into a space of focus, respect, and shared emotion. The audience had been silenced, not out of fear, but out of awe and admiration. The small girl had done something extraordinary. She had brought everyone together through the power of music, reminding them of the beauty that could come from courage, dedication, and a willingness to share one's heart openly. This moment would be remembered, not just as a performance, but as a testament to the quiet strength and remarkable talent of a child who dared to step forward and let her music speak for her. The small girl took a final deep breath as the last echo of her piano performance faded away. The auditorium was no longer just a room with chairs and lights. It had become a space charged with emotion, a place where every person present felt a part of something extraordinary. The applause began softly, hesitant at first, as if the audience did not want to break the spell that had settled over the room. Then it grew steadily, louder and more heartfelt, until the entire room was clapping, cheering, and some standing to show their admiration. The girl smiled shyly, her cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and embarrassment. She had done something incredible, something she had never imagined she could do. Her small hands rested lightly on the piano keys, still feeling the vibration of the last notes in her fingertips. The audience's reaction was overwhelming, but it was also a moment of affirmation. She realized that her music had reached them, had spoken to them in a way that words could not. It was a powerful and humbling feeling, knowing that her courage and dedication had made such an impact. The organizers moved closer, offering congratulations and gentle praise. They told her how proud they were, how remarkable her performance had been. She nodded, still catching her breath, feeling a warmth that spread from her chest to her entire body. Every fear she had felt before stepping on stage seemed distant now, replaced by the exhilaration of having shared something beautiful. It was a moment she would remember for the rest of her life, a defining experience that marked the first time she had truly understood the power of her own voice. People in the audience were still applauding, some wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling broadly, still processing the extraordinary talent they had just witnessed. Children whispered to their parents about how amazing it was that someone so small could produce such grand music. Adults shook their heads in disbelief, amazed by the skill, emotion, and bravery displayed by the young girl. The room was filled with a mix of admiration, awe, and inspiration, a feeling that lingered long after the final note had faded. The girl glanced around at the faces in the crowd, catching brief glimpses of people whose expressions were filled with wonder. She realized that she had created a connection, a shared experience that transcended age, background, and expectation. Her music had become a bridge, linking her heart to theirs, and the realization made her smile even more. She had not only played the piano, she had communicated something deeper, something human and universal. The power of music had allowed her to express herself in a way that words never could. A few people in the audience approached after the performance, offering personal congratulations and words of encouragement. Some praised her talent, others commented on her courage to step forward and perform despite being nervous. Each word was a reminder that she had achieved something significant. She felt a mixture of humility and pride, knowing that the impact of her performance extended beyond the applause. She had inspired others, given them hope, and shown them the beauty of courage and authenticity. As she walked off the stage with the organizers, she felt lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The nervousness that had gripped her at the start was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. She realized that stepping out of her comfort zone, facing her fears, and sharing her music had not only touched the audience but had transformed her own understanding of herself. She felt empowered, knowing that she could rise to challenges, express herself fully, and make a difference through her passion. Backstage, she was congratulated by other performers and helpers. They spoke of how incredible her performance had been, how moved they were by the depth of emotion she conveyed. She listened quietly, absorbing the praise without letting it overwhelm her. The experience had been intense, and now, in the calm backstage environment, she could reflect on what had happened. Every smile, every nod, every tear in the audience had been a validation of her courage and talent. She thought about the journey that had led her to this moment, the countless hours of practice, the quiet mornings at home, the times when she had struggled with difficult passages but refused to give up. All of those experiences had built her skills and her confidence, preparing her for this exact moment. She realized that the hard work, patience, and perseverance had paid off, not just in the quality of her performance, but in the emotional impact it had created. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The organizers spoke softly to her, encouraging her to continue playing, to keep pursuing her passion for music. They reminded her that talent like hers was rare and precious, and that she had a gift that could touch countless lives. The girl nodded, feeling the weight of their words and the promise they carried. She felt motivated to continue learning, practicing, and sharing her music, knowing that it had the power to inspire, comfort, and move people. As she left the backstage area, the audience continued to talk about her performance. Conversations buzzed with amazement, admiration, and curiosity. People shared their experiences, recalling moments when a note or phrase had touched them deeply. They marveled at the courage of a young girl who had stepped onto the stage without hesitation and played with such skill and heart. The story of her performance began to spread, not through grand announcements, but through word of mouth, heartfelt storytelling, and personal reflection. Everyone who had been there would remember it, some for the rest of their lives. The girl walked home later, carrying a small sense of triumph and satisfaction. She thought about the people she had touched, the hearts she had moved, and the way she had felt while playing. She realized that the experience had been more than just a performance. It had been a moment of connection, growth, and self-discovery. She felt proud of herself, not just for the music, but for the courage it had taken to step forward, to face her fears, and to share her gift with the world. At home, she reflected on the day, thinking about how unexpected opportunities could lead to unforgettable moments. She understood that sometimes the greatest achievements come from taking a risk, even when it is frightening. The memory of the audience, the silence, the connection, and the applause filled her with a sense of accomplishment that was both exhilarating and comforting. She realized that music had given her a voice, a way to communicate her feelings, and a means to inspire others. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the journey ahead. She knew there would be more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to share her music. But she also knew that the courage, determination, and passion she had discovered within herself that day would guide her through whatever came next. The memory of the small girl who had been pulled from the crowd, who had stepped onto the stage and silenced the room with her piano performance, would stay with her forever. It was a story of bravery, talent, and the extraordinary power of music to touch hearts. A story that she now carried as a part of who she was and who she would become.